Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let me say thank you all very much for giving up your time this evening. It's very nice to see you all, so thank you.
April Ashley, hello, welcome to the Asian Boat Roundabout. You survived the crossing of the roundabout, and now we're going to have an intimate conversation in front of a few close friends.
Lovely people.
When was the last time you were in Birmingham? Can you remember?
A few days ago. I just came down to do an interview for the BBC, and we walked. I've never walked so much. I couldn't go out the next day even to get my newspaper because my legs were so bad. So it was literally a couple of days ago. But I hadn't been here since they built the Spaghetti Junction, so it's a long time ago.
Have you been boycotting Birmingham because of the Spaghetti Junction?
Oh, good heavens, no. But I don't have any family here or any friends here, so. But I do now. Thank you all.
Of course, you're a Liverpool lass.
Yes, yes.
Which part of Liverpool?
Well, I was brought up on the docks, which was very, very Dickensian in those days. And of course, we were not allowed to go out in the evening because the ladies were plying their trade on the docks where we lived. And we're not allowed because our parents thought that we might be led astray by all the strange noises that was going on behind the pillars and things like that. But we used to sneak out once in a while. And later on, when the war started, and we were being bombed terribly, because Liverpool was then the greatest seaport in the world, and terribly important. And of course Hitler wanted it very badly. We had to move away from the docks, so we moved to a place called Norris Green, which was meant to be genteel. But unfortunately, the whole of Scotland Road, which was the most ugly noisy, disastrous street. The police were not allowed to walk around alone at night. They had to walk in twos. The whole of Scotland Road moved with us, so it wasn't so genteel. And of course, you had, the only nice thing about moving to Norris Green is you had an outside loo, but it wasn't at the end of the garden. It was attached to the house, but you did have to go outside. So,
Well, tell us a little bit about the family background.
well, I can't come, of course we were all Catholics, you know, and there was no such thing as any kind of taking care. So my mother had 10 children. 6 of us survived, and so the family, but once I'd gone through what I went through, they all rejected me. But before that, my mother hated me. I think she hated every one of us, but she particularly hated me. Because I was so different. She wouldn't even take my hand. My brothers and sisters wouldn't touch my hand. They didn't want anything to do with me. So it was a very incredibly lonely childhood, but thank God I had a dog. And when you have a dog, an animal means so much to you. And it used to be lovely to go poaching on Lord Derby's estate and bring home a few rabbits and things like that. And it was an incredibly lonely childhood. And my mother, long before the expression child abuse was invented, my mother was threatened with prison because she beat me so many times with my father's belt that I had a hole in my back like the size of a golf ball, and the doctors could put their thumb in and feel my spine. So they said, Mrs. Jameson, if you touch this child again, we're going to have you sent to prison. So that gives you some idea of the relationship between my mother and myself. And I lived through that all the way up until I went away at 15. And I started work, by the way, the day World War II came to an end, I started work in St. John's Market, carrying sides of bacon which were twice the size of myself. And so I had a rather schizophrenic upbringing because with my mother, I had this very difficult time. The people I worked for would send me to the cinema in a chauffeur-driven car. They would give me that much whiskey before dinner, and they would allow me a glass of wine with dinner. So it was a very schizophrenic upbringing after the age of 10. You had this lovely side, and then you had this horrendous side of my poor father, you see, was always away at sea. He was in the Royal Navy. He was torpedoed twice. And the moment that World War II came to an end, my mother threw him out.
You were very fond of your father, weren't you?
I adored him. I absolutely worshipped my father. But we saw so little of him because of the war, because they were away at sea. He was away at sea all the time. My father was an extraordinary man. He's the only man I know in that time who would get away with calling another man darling. He'd say, darling boy, would you like a drink? You know? It was just wonderful to see the way other men would look at him and then say, okay, Fred, oh, I'd love one. He was wonderful. He had the most marvellous sense of humour. But unfortunately, he was an alcoholic. And so the only times I saw him after my mother threw him out was when he would come to me and ask for some money to go to the pubs. And I was always delighted to give it to him. I was never mean about it.
Your father had a favourite dish, didn't he? That was a little bit unusual.
He had lots of favourite dishes, but his favourite dish was the most extraordinary thing. He loved mushrooms just being very gently heated in beautiful cream. And just astonishing, you know, for a man. He did become a cook later on. But considering his upbringing, it was quite extraordinary to find this man with such fine tastes.
Yes. Do you think you inherited your taste from your father?
Well, certainly I inherited my looks from my father. I looked nothing like my mother or my brothers or sisters. tragedy for me was when my father was dying and I went to the hospital to see him. And I looked down at him and his hair was jet black, as was mine. My hair was blue-black when I was young. It's blue now because I put some stuff in it. But I looked at my father die, and there wasn't a single grey hair on that man's head. And I thought, hallelujah, I'm his child, I'm the one who looks like him, I'm the one who behaves like him. But unfortunately, by the time I was 25, I was plucking them out like mad. But he went to his grave with his hair jet black. And he'd been in a coma for quite a few months, so he couldn't possibly have died.
But you weren't quite like other boys, most other boys in Liverpool.
I wasn't like anybody else at all, really. Other boys, I only had one friend, and the boys used to bully me like mad, but happily with my dog, he waited for me outside the school. If I went to school, I could hardly ever go to school because I was born with brittle bone syndrome, and often I couldn't walk for months on end because somebody had jumped on my feet or knocked me over. I was bullied the whole time. So having Prince was rather marvellous. Where were we going with this, by the way?
Well,
oh yes, the children.
Yes.
Yes, it was ghastly because, you know, the one friend I had was a young man called Vincent Patterson. And I swear to this day that he's a saint and that he's sitting right there because he's the only person who didn't use foul language in Liverpool. Liverpool, as you know, in those days was a very rough city. And everybody used to use the most horrendous language. Like you hear on TV now, unfortunately. And he went to Cheshire for the weekend, and he drank some water out of a stream, and it was contaminated, and he died 3 days later. And I lost the only friend I ever had.
I think you said something in a class at school. You went to a very strict Catholic school.
Yes, St. Teresa's.
They had you praying on your knees several times a day.
Well, I used to go to Mass every morning, you see. I used to get up at 6 o'clock every morning and go to Mass. And in those days, you were not allowed to eat or drink anything before you took communion. So, but I didn't like food. I was a very strange child in many ways, because I didn't like food. I wouldn't eat meat. I wouldn't eat chicken. I would eat a bit of fish occasionally. But my favourite food was going into the garden and plucking a beetroot out of the ground and rubbing it against the wall to get the skin off and eating it right from the ground. And the same with carrots. And those were my favourite things.
You were asked...
By the way, there wasn't much food around. You got 1 egg a week and 2 ounces of meat per person. 2 ounces of meat is about that big. But I gave mine away all the time to my brothers.
Was it around that time that you famously gave that response to the question in school? You were set an essay question or something about what do you want to be when you grow up? And instead of saying train driver or policeman or whatever it was, a working class boy in Liverpool at that time was supposed to want, you said...
I said I wanted to be a movie star.
And live a lovely life.
And the X-Factor didn't exist in those days. It was an extraordinary thing for a child from a very working class background to say they wanted to be a movie star. And I paid for it because they thumped me even more after that. Because they thought I was trying to be uppity.
Well, where did those dreams, as we like to call them now, come from? Were you a fan of the cinema? Did you go there to escape?
We used to go to the kids' matinee every Saturday morning, and yes, I didn't think it came from that particularly. I just thought, you know, that it's such a wonderful art form, and I was very good at art, and I think somewhere it had crossed, and in my mind, I wanted to be a movie star.
a sense, your dream sort of came true then, isn't it? I mean, you didn't quite become a movie star. I think
no, they wouldn't let me. I was in quite a few movies, actually. And then I got the part of a Chinese girl in The Road to Hong Kong with Bing Crosby and Bob Hope. But unfortunately, just a few weeks before shooting started, the people in the newspaper had, exposed me, and they tried to sack me. But the 6 Eurasian girls I was working with were absolutely marvelous. We had become such good friends, and these 6 beautiful girls, Bing Crosby was having a wild affair with one of them, Mei Ling, and they said, well, if April goes, we go. And of course they couldn't possibly restart everything, the casting, because it would have cost thousands and thousands of pounds. But there was a very amusing moment when they were doing the Chinese makeup. I looked ridiculous with this Oriental makeup because I looked like the English rose. And when they were putting all these pieces of hair on my head, I suddenly pointed at this big piece of hairpiece and I said, oh, could I possibly have that one on my head? And they said, oh no, that's Miss Collins's fringe, Joan Collins. It was about that big. That was terrible. But they took my part away from me. They kept my back to the camera, and they took my name off the credits. So there you are. But I had a slight revenge, because in those days when you made movies, you were not allowed to look into the camera. But as we carried out Bob Hope on our shoulders, we had to carry Bob Hope out. And I threw my head back and I looked straight into the cameras and I burst out laughing. And if you watch it, it goes as quick as that, but you can still see that was my revenge on those people. Revenge is awfully good.
But going backwards in time a little bit, again back to Liverpool, there was a period when you tried to be more like what a boy was supposed to be.
Well, yes, because, when you... I mean, we're going back to the 1940s, and when I was a child, from the moment I could think for myself, I knew I wanted to be a girl. And I had the most horrendous time, because I tried to commit suicide a few times. But by the same token, I wanted to emulate my father. And I was very lucky, because in taking out these orders on this huge bike, I met a Mrs. Rossiter, and her husband was the captain of the Queen Elizabeth, the old one. I mean, I'm not talking about the Queen, I'm talking about the ship. And Mrs. Rossiter was so divine. Her daughter was quite a famous model. And Mrs. Rossiter, when I arrived, she'd see me panting with the sweat and the heat, and she'd invite me in for a cup of tea. And she was incredibly beautiful. And she'd say, well, what do you want to do with your life? You don't want to be on a bike for the rest of your life, do you? And I said, well, I'm just coming up to 15, I'm not that old. And I said, but I want to be like my father. I didn't want to be like my mother. And she said, well, what does your father do? And I said, well, he's in the Navy. And she said, oh, you want to go to the Navy? She said, I'll arrange that for you immediately. And she did. So when I was 15, off I went to the SS Vindicatrix in Bristol. And then I was immediately on a ship crossing the Atlantic Ocean to Jamaica, through the Panama Canal, into the Pacific Ocean, up to Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, on up to Canada, to Vancouver Island, Victoria, Nanaimo, and into the fjords, where you saw the most amazing orcas. To see those fins coming out of the water was astonishing. And I loved going to sea. I had a lot of problems with the sailors. To this day, those sailors, had they known that I was in trouble, they would have been my friends. They were supermen.
You went to sea as a seaman, as a training seaman?
Yes, and
instead of a steward. Do you think
well,
life might have panned out differently?
no, because in those days, you see, it was decided that, I don't know what it's like now, but in those days, the tradition was that if you were gay, you went into the catering side, you served the passengers and things like that. Well, because I wanted to emulate my father, I decided to go on deck, which was where all the dangerous jobs are done. Like I was almost decapitated. We were coming up the Manchester Shipping Canal one day, and we were tied up, and there were these enormous steel ropes, and there was this great sort of snap, and one of the old sailors threw me to the deck, and I was furious until I suddenly had this word, we would have been killed, we would have been cut right in half. That's how marvelous they were. So, no, I just wanted to emulate my father, you see.
I read that you also emulated, or tried to emulate Robert Mitchum a little bit.
Oh, yes, I tried to walk like him. What a laugh.
How does he?
It's so funny that I was to meet him many years later when I was living in France. And he asked me to go to bed with him, and I refused. It was that walk. People used to laugh at me because slow motion. Wonderful. Very nice man, by the way.
But didn't you also try and make your voice deeper?
Yes, unfortunately, I used to sing solo in front of the whole school, and we had a wonderful choir. But I got so fed up with everyone saying, you're a girl, and this, that, and the other, that I had some kind of breakdown, and I broke my voice, and, during my divorce, I had to be examined from head to toe. I had everything x-rayed. They listened to my voice, and the specialist, and they said, well, her voice is cracked, and so something must have happened. So that's why I can't even hold a note. If I started singing, you'd be out of this room in 2 seconds flat. I sound like a moose at bay. Very sad, I should have kept it, but I didn't know what the future held, so there you are.
But speaking of your voice, it's not what you would expect today, your voice, from a Liverpool lass who...
And it was very strange because my mother would say to me, why do you talk posh? Because all my brothers and sisters had a Liverpoolian accent. And I don't know where it came from. I think myself, this is what I tell myself anyhow, is that when I met Mrs. Rossiter and her daughter and heard the beautiful English being spoken, it must have been like classical music to me, that I took it in, like I listened to classical music, the beauty of it. And it is a beautiful language, so why not enhance it? Which is what I try to do.
I imagine that you've been ribbed for it sometimes. Was it Ringo Starr who liked to call you the Duchess?
They all called me. No, they didn't call me the Duchess, they called me the fucking Duchess.
That's what you said.
My first boyfriend after the operation was Lord Willoughby de Eresby. He owned a nightclub, and we had a table where you could see everybody, but nobody could see you. And unfortunately, Tim, we'd just been in Morocco together, in Tangiers, and then he was meant to pick me up. I was living in Spain at the time. And, unfortunately, he was drowned. He didn't pick me up, thank goodness. Because they found no wreckage of the yacht or anything. Where were we going with this again?
Oh, we were talking about the Beatles.
Oh yes, the Beatles. So then Brian Morrison, who bought the club, called me into his office one evening. He said, April, do you know this group called the Beatles? And I said, no, I've never heard of them. What do they do? He said, well, they sing. And I said, oh, how lovely. So he said, well, they're quite famous now. They've just had the most enormous success in Germany. And they want to use your table. Would you mind terribly if they had it one evening and you had it the next? I said, oh, goodness, no. I said, that's perfectly, democratic. I said, that's fine. But on the evenings when it was my turn, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, they said, ooh, welcome to the fucking Duchess, now we have to move. And I say, yes, you do. And Jerry and the Pacemakers was there one day, and he just brought out Ferry across the Mersey. And he's a tiny little man. And he said, oh, the fucking hell is that then? I said, get back on that ferry, go right back across that Mersey, and stay there. Move. So, and when I closed the Year of Culture for Liverpool in 2008, we talked about the Beatles, and I said what a bore Ringo Starr was. And then I said, oh my God, everyone's going to hate me, they're the Beatles, They applauded like mad, because apparently he'd just been in Liverpool, and he was very rude about Liverpool. And Liverpool is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. It has the first skyscraper in the world, the Liver Buildings, because that was opened in 1911. The Empire State Building and the Chrysler Buildings, they weren't opened until the 1930s, so nobody realizes that Liverpool had the first skyscraper. So it was quite fascinating.
Didn't Paul McCartney...
Sorry if I get off track.
Didn't Paul McCartney have plans for you?
Oh yes, he wanted to go to bed with me, and I said, well, get rid of your entourage, because by this time, you were terribly famous, You've got about 20 people there. So I said, get rid of all the tarts that are with you first. And so all these poor girls were sent off. And then I said, get rid of your entourage. And then we were together and drinking champagne. He said, would you go to bed with me? And I said, okay. And I said, you get the bill and I'll get the taxi. Well, now, I had a restaurant at this time, and every taxi driver in London knew me very well. And so I said to the taxi driver, I said, when I say go, go. So Paul McCartney comes out, all joyful. And I said to the taxi driver, go. And all I had was, you fucking bitch, I hate you. But it was okay afterwards. I mean, we were friends afterwards. And George Harrison was so lovely. And I did a show with John Lennon and Yoko Ono with poor Simon D. I don't know if any of you remember Simon D.
Yeah.
And he committed professional suicide by objecting about children doing commercials on television. Well, of course, you can't play about with the people with the money and the power, because you can't win. And that poor man ended up driving a bus around London. But it was nice to see John and Yoko. She asked to film my bottom. That's how I met her. She rang out to, I hear you very beautiful. I want to film your bottom. Me Yoko Ono. I said, me a plastic, me no like. But I'm told it's a cult movie. And her philosophy was that bottoms had more character than faces. And I said, how can that be? A bottom doesn't have eyes. That says it everything, doesn't it? Would you mind if I have a little whiskey?
But we could assume then that the seafaring life wasn't for you.
It would have been. I mean, I love going to sea. I really do. Not too much. For the taste, thank you. When I was 60, for instance, I got a job on a yacht, just two of us, a 42-foot yacht. And we sailed from San Diego to Tahiti, going via the Marquesas and the tour motors, which was Nukahiva, where we arrived, and there are still cannibals there. And then we went to Manahi, where I went to see how they put the thing into the pearl. So they put a little bit of sand or something into the sex of the pearl. And of course the oyster, into the oyster, and the oyster becomes irritated and produces something beautiful like that. So it was fascinating to see that. And then we went on to Rangiora, which is the second largest atoll in the world. But two days out from San Diego, this man showed me a photograph of himself in the Hitler Youth with the swastika. Well, I almost puked all over him, you see, and I should have done. And he would turn out, I said, you said you were Swiss. He said, I am Swiss. I said, well, how come you were in the Hitler Youth? He said, because I was German, I was born in Hamburg. I said, you were in the Hitler Youth. And of course, I hadn't been, growing up in Liverpool during all that bombing. So we didn't get on very well. But it was a long trip, 2 months. And I just loved it at night, to be out there. Because you hardly see one another when you're at sea, because somebody has to be on watch the whole time, particularly when you're a small yacht like that. And there's nothing for me more beautiful in the whole world than looking up at the stars in the middle of the ocean. I just love it. People get cabin fever, they get sick, they get this, and I'm in heaven. There, I love getting to sea.
Well, just to fill in the background a little bit more, you did attempt the second voyage with the Merchant Navy. You had a bit of a crisis, said you ended up taking an overdose.
Yes, yes, it was very sad because I'd met all these young men, and Terence Stamp pinched a little bit of this story for Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, because I met all these young men who were extraordinary. They were gay young men, and they were just marvelous. And there was one called Roxy. We used to have a pot of green eyeshadow on each eye. Now, in those days, that was quite brave. And this man came up to me one day, and he knocked me to the ground for no reason at all. And Roxy came up, and Roxy was all camp and terribly flamboyant, and as I say, full of ice. And you've never seen anyone hit the ground like that man hit the ground. And Terence Stamp pinched that for Queen Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, whatever. But then I tried to commit suicide. I jumped into the River Mersey, which was a very dangerous river to jump into because the current is enormously fast. And so they just thought I was mad when I said I wanted to be a woman. So they put me in a lunatic asylum. And you were tied to the bed. You could only have one hand free. You could not have a knife, you could not have a fork. You could only eat with a spoon. When you went to the loo, you had two big men with coats, white coats following you. And you were not allowed to close the door. And it was horrendous being in a ward with all these screaming people. So then they said, well, if you will do some electric treatment, we'll let you go to Walton Hospital. Well, when they put that crown on your head, and I always wanted to be a queen, but I tell you, this is a different kind of crown, and you saw the person who had just come back from this treatment. And you're tied down, by the way, you're strapped all over, all the way down, arms strapped. In those days, it was so primitive, it made your eyeballs bleed. You get blood coming out of your eyeballs. It was absolutely horrendous. And they gave me male hormones for 1 year. They gave me the truth drug. They gave me etham. They gave me everything. And finally they said, we can't do anything for you. Just go and make the best of your life. You know, happily I'm still here. Not bad for 76.
You left Liverpool, and for a time you were living in London, and then Jersey.
Yeah.
But then you really came into your own at Le Carrousel.
At Le Carrousel. Yes, we used to spend the summer in Jersey picking potatoes or tomatoes until you could get a job in a hotel. Because I didn't ever pick potatoes or tomatoes. You know, for £1 a day, your back is broken. It's terrible. But then you get a job in a hotel, and then you made money. You see, if you worked very hard, you made quite a lot of money. But I did, you know. And I went to the south of France for a holiday, and everyone kept coming up to me and saying, "Why don't you? Do you work at the Carousel? Why don't you work at the Carousel?" And finally, I got hold of some English friend of mine. I said, "What was this place called the Carousel?" So they said, "Oh, April, when we drive back, we'll drive you there and we'll take you." So they did. Well, when I walked in and saw Coccinelle and Bombay and Capucine and all these people, it was mind-boggling. I mean, Coccinelle had breast out to there. She could have had a lunch on her tray. Every movie star in France was petrified if she came to a premiere. And we knew all the movie stars because they all came to the Carousel. Because the moment she would arrive, and all the cameras were on Martine Carroll and from Marais and people like that, she would pull the top down. And there were these bazookas looking, well, tits were a great premium in the 1950s, you know. So she destroyed many people's premieres. But when I met her, I just thought, this is the most incredible thing I've ever seen in my life, to see these people. I already had breasts at 15, I had spontaneous breast growth, but it was the size of Coccinelle's. Obviously she'd had enhancement. And so I was taken backstage to meet Monsieur Marcel, the owner. And he said to me, "Can you sing?" And I said, "Oh no, I can't sing." He said, "Can you dance?" I said, "A little bit." He said, "Well, what can you do?" I said, "Well, not much really." He said, "Okay, you've got the job." I ended up presenting the shows for the Carousel, and he was marvellous to me, I must say. They were all wonderful. In 2006, I was living in the south of France at the time, and they were doing a documentary on Barnaby's life, and she rang me up and said, "Would you come and be part of it? But we have to do it in Marseille because Coccinelle is too ill." And I said, "Oh, that's fine, yes, I'll get Martine to drive me over." And so we went over. And she and I toured Italy together for a year, Coccinelle, and we didn't get on very well. She'd been brought up with prostitutes, and she couldn't read and she couldn't write. And she used to call me Milady, but not in a nice way, in a very sarcastic way, because I used to do My Fair Lady. But the most extraordinary thing happened. After we finished filming, she pulled me aside and she said, "You know, April," she said, "I always loved you and I always had the greatest respect for you." Blah, blah. But unfortunately, she couldn't come and dine with us. And she kept ringing me up saying, "Can I come over for lunch?" And I said, "Any time, I'd be so honored if you would." Then her husband rang me up and said she'd just had a terrible tumor on top of her head and it's burst. He said, "But you'll be very amused to know that none of the doctors can convince her, because she had lovely blonde hair, that the blood is not a ruby tiara." She thought she was wearing a ruby tiara. and she was dead a few days later. It was very sad. But it was lovely to have seen her one last time. And from the carousel, I went to Casablanca, and I just did a documentary about Dr. Burrow. I just got an email today, because I refused to go to the premiere. I just got an email today telling me it's a great, great success, so look out for it, it's out. But it's in Dutch. I'm sure that I will do translations. But it was great. It was a great honor to meet Dr. Burrow's son. I was the only person Dr. Burrow's son wanted to meet because he was told that I knew his mother, and he said, no, nobody knows my mother. My mother wouldn't have anything to do with people like that. And so he agreed to fly to Nice. We were shooting in Nice, Grasse and Cannes. And he came to meet me. He was incredibly handsome, not quite as handsome as his father, but still very handsome. And he said, they told me you knew my mother. Tell me how you knew my mother. I said, well, first of all, she used to take me up to your apartment, which was the whole top of the clinic. I said, and she used to pour gin down my throat by the bottleful. I mean, because she was so desperately unhappy because of cette blonde. And the moment I said that expression, he burst out crying, because he knew then that I had, in fact, known his mother, because his father was having an affair with a blonde, and she always referred to the woman as cette blonde. And we spent the whole day filming, and then he flew away. It was lovely to meet the son of the galatea that made you.
So it was Coccinelle, wasn't it, who had the operation first?
Yes, Coccinelle went first, and I went after her. She didn't give me the address by the Kiki Mustik. Oh, there's me doing Eliza Doolittle. This is what I was talking about. This was lovely, because I introduced My Fair Lady to France and Italy. And this is how I looked as Eliza Doolittle. But underneath all this, the hat with the hair, my hair was scraped back. And when I took the hat off, I got behind the curtain. I'd come out with a big tiara on and this wonderful silver gown. And we'd go into, I could have danced all night. Not me singing, of course, but, you know. So that was Eliza Doolittle. But I got it from Kiki Mustik. We have a shot of Kiki Mustik, actually. The one of us in Italy. No, that's my husband, the bastard. Robbed me of everything. These aristocrats, aren't they charming? If we go a little bit, no, that's Italy too. That's Peter O'Toole. That's Sarah Churchill. She was my mentor. That's in Rome. That's Edward. He was my boyfriend, but he was killed. He was only 22 when he was killed.
How was he killed?
Car crash. This is by David Bailey. This is at the premiere of Blood and Sand, and I shocked the press by saying, didn't Valentino have a very large bottom? This is a shot. That's in Joie Le Pain. That's with Julia Lockwood's daughter. That's Julia Lockwood, the daughter of Margaret Lockwood. There's Margaret Lockwood. And myself, and that's me. That's me. C'est moi. That's Amanda Lear on the left. That's in Milan, after the show. We used to have games after we finished the show. We'd all dress up and do things. So I'm Hiawatha, yeah.
Did you undermine the Lear?
There's Kiki. Now, Kiki was the most extraordinary female impersonator, because look at that face and that elegance. Kiki was absolutely marvelous. He was married with a little boy, and when he took the wig and the makeup off, we all had to walk through the salle to get out after the show. Nobody ever recognized Kiki Mystic, because he looked like a little businessman with this briefcase, and yet made up as a woman, stunningly beautiful. There's again a shot in Spain. You've seen that one? Yeah, that's me going to the divorce court. You've seen that? Well, that gives you an idea of what kind of trick nature pulls on you.
Beautiful. No pictures of Joey?
No, no. They're too sexy.
Would you still describe him as the love of your life?
No, Edward was the love of my life. Jay was terribly selfish. Edward was an intellectual. He became the youngest barrister in England when he was only 22, and he was killed shortly afterwards. It was awfully sad.
But after the operation in Morocco, you went back to the carousel for a while.
Yes, because I was brave, you see, because the operation cost an awful lot of money. And although Dr. Burrow was marvellous, because I was very ill, and I'd lost all my hair. And Dr. Burrow was marvellous. He just said, I don't want you to worry about money. You can stay here as long as you want. And I said, no, I have to go back to Paris and make some money because I intend to go back and live in London. And having Sarah Churchill as a mentor was extraordinary. And having Julia Lockwood, offering me to share her flat was wonderful. And Margaret approved, because Margaret was pretty tough. Talk about her sailor's mouth. There's this line, movie star, which some of you older people might remember, Margaret Lockwood. And so I came back to London after Paris. I worked at the Carousel, and my boss was marvellous. Marcel said to me, I'll buy you a flat, I'll buy you a car, I'll buy you a mink coat, every colour you want. I said, yes, but Marcel, I'll be in debt to you for the rest of my life. And he said, well, that's what I want. I want you to stay here. Because I'd become very famous in France by then, and Italy. And I said, no, my future's over here. I passed, the thought passed, I haven't had a future in London. So I came back to London, and everybody kept saying to me, what do you do? And of course I didn't have to do anything for a while, because I'd earned enough money to be quite comfortable. And everyone said, are you a model? So I thought, well, that's not a bad idea. So I went to a model agency, and they took me on right away. And I became Vogue's favourite underwear model because I was so tall. But the day that it came out in the newspapers, from that day, which was in 1961, to this day, which is almost 52 years later, I have never, ever been able to get a job in England. So there you have it. So that is what I call difficult.
And do you know who it was who sold the story?
Yes. A so-called friend said it. And I was so angry because they only got £5. Now they got a few £100 or something. I might have been more forgiving. But when I found that they only got £5, I was absolutely livid and furious. But it was very sad that I went into models, talked to my agent, and she said, April, you've had it. You'll never get another job. Yeah, go and live abroad. And I refused at first. I did quite a few auditions. The last one I did was for Bourneville Chocolate. And they wanted a beautiful woman who had a beautiful voice, rather dark voice. And I read for them 6 times. And then as the audition came to an end, there was a wonderful agent who organized the whole thing called Kathy Canty. And she came down the stairs and she was crying her eyes out. And she said, April, said, just think you're fantastic, but they cannot use you because Cadbury's will not allow them. That's how you had to live. So I had to go and live abroad again.
But you were taken up by London society afterwards.
Oh yes, I met everybody. But life is extraordinary because even when I was 15 and I was in the Navy, we docked in London for 3 days. And I shared a cabin with 2 young men who were very nice. And they said, do you want to come into Soho with us? And I said, oh yes, I'd love to see Soho because you know all about Soho and all these terrible women who did terrible things, and doorbells with names under them and things like that. I said, oh yes, and the writers and the artists, what Bohemia, oh I'd love it. So we went to a restaurant called Quo Vadis. And as we came in, we were just sitting down, and the maitre d' came over to me, and he said, excuse me, miss. But of course my friends were screaming with laughter, because we were in the Navy. But he said, excuse me, miss, well, somebody would like to meet you. And I said, who would want to meet me? I didn't know anybody in London. And the maitre d', Mario, said to me, it's a very special man. And I said, who? Where? And he said, there. I said, oh, it's Father Christmas. It was Albert Einstein. And I met him twice. And he called me Madame Butterfly because before I started wearing mascara, I had yards of eyelashes. They're still quite long. But he'd say, look down. And I looked down and he'd say, look, there's 2 black butterflies on her cheeks. So he called me Madame Butterfly. So it's strange how people would be attracted to me and why I don't know.
You became part of the swinging London scene as well as...
Well, yes, because, as I said, the first boyfriend I had was Lord Willoughby Daresbury. He was the heir to the Earl of Lancaster. And to have someone like that, enormously handsome, enormously wealthy, and with a 13th century title, you can't go wrong. You'll go wherever you want.
Was it around that time that you met Sir Peter Osborne?
Oh no, that was much later. That was later.
Oh, that was later. Yes. The father of the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
That's right.
Yes. You had a thing with him?
Yes. And it was very amusing because his sister rang me up the next day and said, what was it like? And I said, well, it was more like a snack than a meal. And he's furious because the press keep bringing this up. Not I don't tell them, They're just interested because his son is now the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And his sister will not stop telling the story. I don't tell it. And she is Jenny Little of Osborne and Little, because she married Jenny Little, the creator of Osborne and Little.
You did end up married to an aristocrat.
Yes, he was the late Lord Rowallan, and he was just the heir to Lord Rowallan at the time. His father was the chief scout after Lord Baden-Powell died, but then the Queen made him the Governor General of Tasmania. But Arthur was a very strange man. And, any captain at Sandhurst who rides side saddle in full uniform has got to give on. And he used to do that in front of his fellow officers.
But the marriage wasn't a great success.
I wouldn't think so. It lasted 14 days. We were married for 7 years, but I mean, he was impossible. He was a schizophrenic. He had two personalities, and he was Arthur one minute, and then I always called the female persona that would arrive, I called her she who must be obeyed, because he was just outrageous. And, you know. But he promised me if we got married it would all go away, but it didn't. I went away.
Of course, it all ended up in court, in a very famous, protracted court case, which had implications, long-term implications.
And many more kind of, I had to be X-rayed. They made a startling discovery, by the way, because when they X-rayed all my bones, they discovered that none of my bones had fused. When you reach puberty, your bones fuse. And to this day, my bones have not fused. There's just one little incident which should have told them there was something extraordinary gone on. And of course, Ormrod, it was terribly snobby in those days too. This is 1968. And it was terribly snobby because both Arthur and Lord Ormrod had gone to Eton and Oxford, and all that nonsense. And he wouldn't listen to any of my team. I had a marvellous team. And he dismissed them as if they were naughty schoolboys, which I found very irritating. And he would, on the third day, we'd have lunch together, the team and I. And I said to my team, incredible professors and doctors, I said, we've lost this case. And they said, oh, wait, well, don't be so stupid, it's only the third day. I said, no, we've lost this case. And they said, how do you mean? I said, this man will not even look me in the eye when he's asking me a question. That tells me an awful lot about people. I said, we've lost the case. I said, watch when we go back in. And afterwards, we always had a gin and tonic when the day was over. And they all said, you're right. You're absolutely right. You've lost the case. And his summing up was totally personal, which was not by law, should not happen. He's meant to be, above it all, but he wasn't. He was very critical of me, and he shouldn't have been so. He had no right to do that. He sort of recused himself, actually. And his wife was one of my best friends. She was her best friend. And I said, well, what's Lady Ormrod? What does she look like? Strange enough, she looks like a man, and she's never had any children. So, life is very strange.
So do you think that you were being punished, perhaps, for stepping outside not just what was deemed to be your appropriate sex, but also your class?
Oh, totally, yes. It had an awful lot to do with class. Because he wouldn't listen to any of my team at all, as I said. They'd be going to the stand, you have these incredibly eminent professors at Cambridge, and the wonderful doctors and solicitors and QCs. I had 2 QCs. He wouldn't listen to any of them. But when our side got up, they could go on for hours, It's rather like the Speaker of the House at the moment. He let the Labour speak for hours, and they won't let themselves speak. Sorry, I bring up politics.
So you ended up with nothing after...
No, Arthur got the house. The only thing he didn't get was that. Because when my QC turned around and said, well, The house in Spain belongs to Miss Ashley. And Ormerod, instead of ruling on it, which he should have done, he said, oh, take it to another court, I can't be bothered. Those were his words. And then when Arthur turned around and said, I want the engagement ring back too, well, at least Ormerod dismissed that. So, there you are, one diamond. So you got everything.
Yes. Obviously, this left you in a bit of a bad way. I mean, not just financially, but the whole experience.
Yes, I lost 3 stone in weight, and it was incredibly difficult. And on top of that, we opened a restaurant on the day the divorce came through.
That was 88.
88. And to have to greet hundreds of people every night, having gone through that, was unbelievable. And then my friend Peter said, we better put you into a health farm for a week or so to help you. Well, it's completely the wrong thing to do. I should have gone off to Greece and got screwed like mad and got my confidence back. So instead of sitting there, even the woman gave me the massage, Betty. She said, oh, Miss Ashley, I can't bear to touch you. All your bones are sticking out. I lost all my confidence. I should have gone off and had a wild time.
It's interesting that the way you chose your name, and it is a very good name.
Oh, it's wonderful, but you're right at the top of the party list. People get awfully tired after M.
But it's almost like you were creating a brand, we would call it now.
Yes, exactly. There's no brand for me.
Well, yes, it's your true identity. But today, of course, we live in this, what we call celebrity culture.
Yeah.
And people with less claim to fame than yourself do very well out of it. They make a very good living.
Yes, and I've never made a penny.
Is that because you were in a sense born too soon?
Oh yes, I mean I was too far ahead of everything, and so I have a new expression now. It's no fee, no me, because the second but last shoot I did, I walked into the shoot. It was being shot by Johnny Shan's kid, and you've got 13 people. You've got designers, you've got hairdressers, you've got makeup artists. I was wearing a 3.6 million diamond necklace, so you had the jewelers, you had the bodyguards, in case you ran with a stick. So you have 13 people. You're the star of the show. And the only person not being paid is me. So when the Telegraph did that, they did my 70th birthday. So they rang up and said, we want to do your 75th. So I said, okay. Same thing again, dozens of people, dresses galore, jewelry, whatever. But now I don't do anything at all. There was a magazine called Candy. Do any of you know Candy? It's mostly a trans. Well, most of it wouldn't because it's so bloody expensive. It's £40. It only comes out about twice a year. It's this big. And the reporter rang up and said, I got paid for the photograph. But in talking to the hairdresser, I found I was being paid less than the hairdresser, which infuriated me. Because I'm the one with all the jewels on them. You see, before I always did the publicity for the cause, but now I'm too old for the cause. It's time I took a rest and, got on with my own life, and my health is failing. So the owner rang up and he said, oh, I live in a little flat in Barcelona and we can't afford to pay and everything. And I said, well, no fee, no me. So they just concocted this
If the field,
article
so,
in this magazine.
if the field had been right, if Celebrity Big Brother, when that was running, had called you up, would you have considered doing that?
I might have done it 3 years ago. I can't do anything now. I'm not well enough. But I was going to say something. Oh yes, Love magazine. Do any of you know Love magazine? Again, it's a very expensive magazine. They ring me up, we're going to do a transgender version of Love magazine. Would you mind kissing Kate Moss? I said, first of all, I'd be sick. I can't stand that. Then I said, what is the fee? No fee, right? No fee, no me. What are you paying Miss Moss? She's going to be paid thousands and thousands of pounds. And having to kiss that, I won't say it. I've done enough for the cause, is what I'm saying.
Yes.
It's finished. I won't ever do anything for free again. It's a bit too late, but there's nobody wants to. But I do, there's not 1 week goes by without somebody doesn't email me to do something. But now I said, so please show me the expenses, show me how I'm going to get that, and
Yes.
of course the moment you bring up money, they disappear.
Well, I don't think anyone would begrudge you for concentrating a bit more on yourself now. But if things had turned out differently and you had been able to become an actress, which I think you would have been a very good actress.
Yes, well, that was one of the most extraordinary things too about becoming an actress was that when Peter O'Toole and Omar Sharif were staying with me at my house in Spain while they were making Lawrence of Arabia, I told Peter that I was going to go to a drama school in London. And Peter, with all the wonderful intuitive feelings that he has in his intellect, he took my face and he said, hey, and he had tears pouring down his face. He said, don't do that to yourself, they'll never ever let you. Don't do it. But nobody could stop me, so I went off. I won't tell you the school, but it is one of the most important drama schools in the world. And I did the audition. You had to do 3 pieces. I did The Unsex Me Here, Soliloquy from Macbeth. I did something from The Seagull, and then you had to improvise on the third one. And of course then I got a letter about 2 weeks later saying, sorry, you didn't get in. And then many, many years later, I'm in the Chelsea Arts Club having my usual drink, which was champagne, by the way. And this man comes up to me, he said, it's Miss Ashley, isn't it? And I said, yes. He said, I have to tell you something. And I said, what's that? He said, I was one of the judges when you did your audition for them. And I said, oh. I said, how extraordinary. He said, I want to tell you something. He said, we were desperate to take her. We just thought, that figure, those legs, because I had one of the most beautiful leg competition in the South France, by the way. He said, you had everything we wanted, but we were not allowed to take you. So and it's been like that ever since. But you just have to get on with life, That's why I went to live in America. But it even followed me in America. I can't tell you how many jobs I had in America. The moment somebody said to me, oh, aren't you well known in your own country? Or aren't you all over the internet? Of course I didn't know what the internet was at that time. I knew I had to start looking in the paper the next day for another job. Because, and I had hundreds of jobs. But I lasted 20 years, so out there.
Well, even though you obviously had a lot of struggle in your life, and various things haven't turned out the way that you might have wanted them to, Do you think that that little child in Liverpool who told the class that, that they wanted to be a film star and live a lovely life, it does sound as if quite a bit of that came true?
Well, I think the most important thing is when I was recovering in Casablanca after the operation, on the first day they were letting me out to go for a walk with a nurse in tow, of course, because I was very weak. And I fainted in the gutter. And I woke up screaming with laughter. You know, I suppose the people walking past thinking too much gin or something, you know. But I said, and the nurse said, "Why are you laughing?" I said, "I'm the happiest person in the world." And some of that still stays with me today. I've never lost that joy of when your body and your mind all become one.
Do we have time for questions from the floor?
But
Would you like to ask a question? See if I can turn this on.
they can shout. I'm sorry, darling, can you speak up a little?
Is it on? Sorry. It looks like on, doesn't it?
Yeah, someone's coming to help.
Do we have some technical support?
You're running up to turn this on.
Another question I have is that for many of us girls, the question arises, if we had a choice, would we live the life we've had, or would we rather be born as a native female?
Oh, I think that we all want to be a natural female or a natural male. You know, it doesn't matter. To be born a transsexual is an incredibly stressful thing to do.
Yeah, you don't think as a gift rather than a curse, you know, kind of two-edged sword.
Well, for me, it's been a terrible two-edged sword because, you know, I had directors, very famous movie directors, where I would meet them in Spain, I would take them to bullfights and explain everything to them, what the music, what meant, what this meant. And they would, again, they would say, with that face, that figure, those legs, we'll make you a movie star. The next day when they'd been told who I was, they wouldn't speak to me. So it's a two-edged sword.
It just seems a bit sad that even like for us girls now, you know, ever since I transitioned, that and a lot of us don't wear, that society has not got their head around the issue.
No, it certainly hasn't. And it won't.
No, I was going to ask you, do you think that...
No one really knows. You have to accept it. You have to try and find a way of living. And, you know, try and find a job where people will accept you and do it that way, because you have to be independent. And it's terribly, terribly difficult. It's not an easy life.
I know how you did a lot of it, doesn't it?
Well, exactly. I'm sure you will be up here too. When I'm gone, you can take it over.
Have you been watching my transsexual son?
Yes.
What do you think?
Well, I'm going to send a donation to the little Liverpudlian. Sarah.
You tried to raise money for it, you said no.
The one who wants to have the breast removed? Oh, I thought that he wanted the one I watched the other night, he was desperate to have it. Because Gary, who lives in Liverpool, was going to find us a place. I was going to send him some
I
money.
mean, he doesn't want to. That was still 6 months ago, things have changed.
Oh, things have changed. I never understand people who don't want to go the whole way. That fascinates me. And I never understand how male to female, how they become lesbians. That always fascinates me. Maybe you can teach me something. Well, I showed a flat in San Diego, where I finally ended up. I lived in Los Angeles, then I lived in San Francisco, then I ended up in San Diego, not knowing it's the lesbian capital of the world. And this is when I was working for Greenpeace. And I ended up sharing a flat with a lesbian, and she was from Austria, and she was so bossy. Every morning I used to get up and say, "Hi, I'll see you." And I wasn't joking. And she said, "April, you've got to try it." What on earth would I go through all that I've been through to try that? She said, "Well, come." And it's called the Bombay. I think it's gone now. So she said, "Will you come to the Bombay with me?" And I said, "Okay." Well, you have these women with the most enormous breasts, and they were all sitting on the counter, these breasts. And they were walking in saying, "Hello, Joe, hello, Fred." And I said, "Oh, good. Take me home, I go." She said, "Well, will you come on Sunday? It's different." So I said, "What's different?" "Well, what's different is that it's a military town, and it's a particularly Navy town. And when you see some of those girls in their whites, they are movie star glamorous. They are so beautiful." And I'm with Sigrid and her partner Cindy, and Sigrid comes sidling up to me and Sigrid. And she says, "You see that girl over there?" And that's when I'm in my 60s. And she said, "You see that girl over there?" And I said, "This beautiful girl." And they're all breaking the law, by the way. They're not supposed to be wearing their whites. And she wants to take her out to dinner. Well, I couldn't get in my car fast enough to leave. So there's many things, you see. But it's a rainbow. Sex is a rainbow. And there's every colour in it. I don't understand it all, you don't understand it all, I don't think anyone in this room would understand it all, because there are so many different things that go on in the world. Have you tried it?
Can't try everything, trust me.
Oh, you're one of those. Desperate.
Just people not pitching holes.
All right.
Then there's when you've got to go there to know not to go there, maybe.
Well, it's nice to meet you.
Any other questions? Yes.
Hello. I was just wondering, after you had the operation, when you came back, what was the reaction like from people who knew you as a boy? Like,
They didn't, you see.
and was it a shock for them, and how were you accepted?
No, I didn't know anybody from my past. For instance, my eldest brother has never spoken to me since 1960, which was when I had the operation. My other brother, I'll call him once in a while, and I'll ring up and say, "Hello, Freddie, how are you?" "Fine." "How's Jean, his wife?" "Fine." "How are your children?" "Fine." He will never ever say to me, "April, how are you?" But I didn't have any problems like you asked, because I didn't know anybody from my past when I came back to London. Go on.
Did you ever meet a new friend? Would you go into the detail of your past of being a boy?
No, I was very lucky, you see, because basically everybody knew.
Yeah.
And so Sir Peter Osborne, my boyfriend, Lord Willoughby, they all knew my history. Because I worked for theatrical agents, and I knew Joan Collins and her sister Jackie, because I used to have to run messages between two agents, So everybody basically knew. That's why it didn't last too long. It only lasted a year before the people came out and told my story. So, in a funny way, that was in my favor, because I didn't have to explain to anybody. If I was going to go into a relationship, with somebody I didn't know. Of course you would have to explain. It wouldn't be fair. But if I was going to have a one-night stand, I certainly wouldn't have bothered. Does that answer your question? Good. Pretty girl, huh?
Any more questions?
Do you feel that perhaps you were born too soon? Because, you know, when you had surgery in 1960, the society was a lot more different to what it is today. People sort of coming out and having it a lot easier.
Oh, they do, yes. And they've got so much help, of course. You know, I mean, I can't tell you how many thousands of people have written to me over the years. And it's so nice to be able to write back and say, there's the Beaumont Society, there's the Press for Change. I've had people from the age of 8 up to 14, and it's so lovely for me to say, you know, I cannot help you. I'm not a professional. But here is the email for mermaids, as you know, for children. And so it's wonderful to be able to do that for people. But it doesn't help transsexuals feeling isolated anyhow, because they're always going to feel isolated.
And are you surprised that society has moved further in the last 40 years than you'd imagine, like when you first transitioned?
Well, I think in a funny way, I was lucky that I did it so early, because...
So I tried to transition 40 years ago.
Really?
I tried to come out over 40 years ago.
Holy mackerel. That's a long time to wait, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I left it. I went into poverty before I came out, purely because of all the issues and lack of information and society. And I still find society still is very important. It just makes you wonder whether it will be. 40 is nothing, I'm 55.
I think for me, again, it was a double-edged sword, because I was fortunate in being incredibly beautiful when I was young. You know, and I had a mane of blue-black hair, I had milk-white skin, I had a 17-inch waist. As I said, I won the most beautiful leg competition in the south of France. So I was terribly lucky. Everybody wanted to meet me. I didn't want to meet anybody. They all wanted to meet me. So it was a double-edged sword for me that everybody, if it was anybody, wanted to meet me. I met every movie star you ever met. I met every Victoria. I used to go out with Hubert de Chavannes. I met Dior. I always say to people, if you've met Albert Einstein, Sir Winston Churchill, you've had Salvador Dali want to paint you, you've been looked over by Picasso, you've been looked over by Freud, and you've met practically everybody. And so earlier on, it was like everybody was desperate to meet me. And of course I was incredibly elegant. I was always dressed by Chanel and Dior and things like that, you see. But I couldn't get a job in England. So I had to live abroad.
Yes.
Why do you think it's different over in France than it is here?
I'm sorry?
Why is it different getting jobs, etc., in France than it is here?
Well, I'll tell you a story. In England, I couldn't get a job as a model. When I went to Spain, and I worked for the House of Rango, they paid me 3 times what they paid the other models. Because it was, you know, it's a different mentality.
Do you think society there is more accepting?
Not at that time, no, because if you were a homosexual in Spain at that time, you could be banished, even if you were Spanish. Franco would banish people. They had to go into exile. But they'd never come up against anyone like me before. So, or if they had, it had been kept quiet. And they got it into their heads that I was a duchess. They always addressed me as Senorita Duquesa. And I only know this because of my husband, you know, they thought he was nowhere near being a duke. But that's what they used to call me all the time, Senorita Duquesa. My maid used to always call me Señorita Duquesa. So it's a different time, you know. I wouldn't know how to answer that. Anybody else?
April, I think transsexuals have an awful lot to thank you for. Somebody has to be a pioneer with surgery, and you were right out there, you know, at the beginning. And through that, over the years, surgery must have improved a huge amount. And I think for those of us that are undergoing surgery or have had it, it's amazing. And I thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming
Thank
along.
you all very much indeed.
And of course, he's trained. It's yours. No, no, no.